Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Ramble podcast. I am your host, Zach Stevens, and we are here to review the episode of Raw from July 31st, 2017, out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. As always, guys, you can follow us on Twitter at Ramble_cast. Again, that is Ramble_cast. You can always check us out on YouTube. That is the premier place to listen to this podcast. That's where you're going to find the highest quality versions of the episodes that we have, as well as our entire backlog of episodes as well. So if you missed maybe one of our pay-per-view reviews or anything like that, all of our shows are uploaded to the YouTube page, and we would greatly appreciate it if you checked us out over there and left us with a subscribe, a like, and a comment. We are also on Podbean. If you're interested in listening to us on the go wherever you are, download the Podbean app and search for us over there. Our URL for Podbean is royalrambleradio.podbean.com. And of course, we are also on twitch.tv. I've been playing some games over there, doing some streaming recently, so if you're interested in watching any of that, check us out over there at twitch.tv/royalrambleradio. Now that is all out of the way, guys, we have an episode of Raw to review. Now, unfortunately, guys, Raw has been on a kind of a hot streak lately, I would say. They've actually been putting on some decent episodes rather than what they used to put on, which was pure garbage. So they've been on a kind of a streak lately. However, tonight, unfortunately, that streak ended. Tonight's episode, now, wasn't completely just trash and horrible like some Raws in the past have been, but the final hour of this episode was absolutely insulting. I don't understand the booking decisions for this particular episode. There's one match in particular, obviously that triple threat match that they had advertised last week between Braun, Joe, and Roman. You would think that would be our main event, right? That's probably the biggest match on this card, easily. However, it was not the main event. They put this match about halfway through the show, and then everything after that was just a fast downhill slope. And on top of that, the main event that we got, which ended up being Big Cass versus Big Show, was some of the worst wrestling I've ever seen in my entire life. This was Punjabi prison levels bad. I honestly cannot believe that we have to be subjected to watching these two guys go at it. I'm going to get more in detail into that, but just know this right off the bat, this was a bad episode of Raw, and that third hour actually cemented it as being a terrible episode. But before we go off on that and get super into it, let's go over a couple of the questions that I wrote down before this episode of Raw started, some of the things that I'm generally thinking about before we head into the episode, some things that I think WWE needs to answer or at least needs to play into a little bit so that we know exactly where they are headed and what direction the storylines and the next pay-per-view is going. The number one question I had was, what kind of build-up are we going to get for that four-way for the Universal title? There's a lot of those Brock rumors swirling. Is he going to go back to UFC? John Jones just called him out at the latest UFC event. So is this going to be the pay-per-view where they finally dethrone the Beast and he starts to go train for UFC and he goes on his merry way to go do some real shoot fighting rather than what we get here in wrestling? Number two, are we going to get any more Dean-Seth tag team teases, or is Dean going to turn heel? What exactly is happening between those two guys? There was a lot of storyline built up around them last week. Are they going to continue to do that, or will it be something that WWE just says, fuck it, and let's stop doing that right now? Number three, are we going to get any more Jason Jordan? What kind of presence is he going to have on this show? Obviously, he is struggling a little bit. The crowd isn't necessarily getting behind him full-heartedly. Each time they bring up his name, you would expect them to cheer. This is going to be Kurt's hometown in Pittsburgh, so you would expect maybe them to at least cheer his own son. I put that in quotations. You think they would get behind Jason Jordan in Kurt Angle's hometown. But not necessarily. Are we going to get those mixed reactions that we've been getting? Is he going to get booed? What is going to happen with this character, and what is the direction for Jason Jordan going forward? And finally, will Bayley finally win back the crowd after beating Sasha for the number one contendership last Monday? Obviously, if you listened to the podcast last week, I questioned them choosing Bayley to win that match. I even brought up the idea that maybe it would be a triple threat at SummerSlam with Sasha involved somehow. just because I don't think there's a lot of momentum for Bayley right now. I think the character still needs a lot of work. I don't think she's necessarily gotten over the hump that she kind of created for herself after Extreme Rules. I understand that they're trying to do the whole, oh, Bayley is the underdog here. She's finally going to get revenge for not getting Extreme a few months ago. But quite honestly, man, I just don't care about the character, and I really would have preferred to see Sasha going against Alexa at SummerSlam. So I'm hoping that they do find a way to push that into a triple threat, even though Bayley did win the number one contendership, and it does look, as of right now, that it will be Bayley versus Alexa. So we open up the show, guys, and Kurt Angle comes out to the ring. Like I said before, this is the hometown of Kurt Angle, so like I said, this would probably be a great place to get Jason Jordan more involved and, get him some more babyface reaction for his son. So Kurt immediately reminds us that, Pennsylvania is his hometown. He says that with SummerSlam around the corner, he has a terrific show planned for us tonight. And he goes on to set up Big Show versus Big Cass for the main event. And I'm already thinking, well, Kurt, this is going to be a horrible show. I don't understand how you think this is going to be a terrific show based off that main event, but whatever, we will see. He then goes on to say Jason Jordan will also be on this show tonight, and he will get an appearance on Miz TV. And when he brings up Jason Jordan, he gets that mixed reaction again. So not even the hometown of Kurt Angle is going to get Jason Jordan over. Jason is going to have to work extra hard to get behind this crowd, or get this crowd behind him, I should say. Then he goes on to say that we will get a triple threat between Braun, Roman, and Joe, which we already knew was happening anyway based off last week. But he says before we can get started tonight, he wants to address the WWE Universe. He goes on to say that this is the anniversary of him winning the gold medal with a broken freaking neck. He then just goes on to thank the crowd, and then he leaves. But as he's leaving the arena, Brock's music hits. And Brock is actually here. I totally was not expecting this. Obviously, WWE trying to use Brock to his fullest while they still have him, if these UFC rumors are in fact true. And at this point, I'm thinking, Brock recently has been actually having a little bit more fun in the ring. You can tell. He's been able to actually cut his own promos recently, which I absolutely love because he kind of has that Daniel Bryan attitude. He gives zero fucks nowadays. So he will just go out there and he will shoot from the hip. He'll probably drop a few curse words. And that's what I really like out of Brock. So anytime Paul Heyman just takes the ring or takes the mic from him and kind of takes the reins of the promo, even though I love Paul Heyman, I kind of wish Brock would cut his own promo nowadays. That is really what I'm looking for out of this character. Anyway, Paul goes on to say that he knows exactly what Kurt is doing. He says he sees the angle that Kurt is playing here. Paul goes on to say that he knows that he has to take the title off of Brock Lesnar. Otherwise, why would he put him in a fatal four-way at SummerSlam against the most stacked division in WWE history? He then goes on to list off all the competitors in the match, Braun, Joe, Roman, putting each guy over. But then he says that he can tell that Kurt wants Joe to win at SummerSlam, saying that he has a demanding chairman that tells him to protect the Raw brand. Obviously, they're really playing into the whole UFC rumors for Brock. This is kind of what this whole promo was based around, really playing into those rumors, but not giving us any definitive answer as to what is going on. Paul then goes on to say that the three guys in this match are going to team up against Brock, then pin each other to win the championship, saying that Brock won't even have to be involved to lose the belt. Heyman then raises the stakes hugely with this next line because he says that if Brock loses the title at SummerSlam, he leaves WWE and Paul Heyman will go with him. He then says Brock will win at SummerSlam and walks away. My immediate thoughts here, Brock obviously did not get any promo time here, which sucks. I really love it when he takes control, grabs the mic, and just, says whatever the fuck he wants, going completely non-PG, essentially. But it was all Paul Heyman on the mic tonight, so I'm not going to complain, but I do wish that we could have seen Brock do something here. You can obviously tell WWE is playing into these Brock Lesnar UFC rumors. This is something that they always do. They want to attach themselves to whatever the mainstream media is talking about. And the mainstream media is kind of talking about Brock Lesnar maybe going back to UFC. So they are obviously going to attach themselves to that at any chance they get. And this entire promo was all based around that. Obviously, by them saying that if Brock loses, he will leave WWE, kind of lends some evidence to that maybe he is going to take off. But quite honestly, I'm pretty sure that Brock is under contract until WrestleMania. So this either tells me that he's going to lose at SummerSlam and him and Paul Heyman are going to take a very long break and then make a surprise return at some point before WrestleMania, or he's just going to win at SummerSlam and this whole thing is a waste of time after all. But I could see them still doing the title switch at SummerSlam, having Brock take a long time off, probably go train for UFC, and then come back, finish out one little match at WrestleMania, and then be done with his WWE contract to then go on to UFC. Now, he's not officially put his name back into the USADA testing pool. That is something that he is thinking about doing. Obviously, John Jones calling him out on the mic last Friday, I believe it was, or Saturday. That also probably, tips the hand of Brock Lesnar as well. He probably wants to get in there and try and beat the shit out of John Jones, which I don't think is going to happen, but we will have to see if that match actually does occur. But in the end, guys, I don't think that even if Brock loses, he will be done with the WWE like Paul Heyman referred to in this promo. I just think he's going to take a very long break. We won't see him for a while. Then he will reappear and finish out his contract, probably with a WrestleMania match. So, and also, even though Paul Heyman said that he is going with him, there's no way Paul Heyman is leaving the WWE. He will go on to find a new client, maybe even a Finn Balor, or maybe someone else that he has been putting over recently, maybe a Samoa Joe, something like that. But make it very clear, guys, Paul Heyman is not leaving WWE, no matter if Brock leaves himself. Next thing we have in the ring is a Hardy Boys segment. They are coming out to the ring. They are going to take on Luke and Carl. And unfortunately, it looks like Carl and Luke aren't necessarily a babyface tag team anymore, which I kind of thought that they were giving that impression last week when they came out and kind of faced off against the Revival. It really looked like they were going to be baby faces, but unfortunately this did not really play into that whatsoever. So the match starts, the Revival are on commentary during this whole thing. There's a whole lot of nothing to start this match with Matt and Carl. Matt goes on to hit an elbow drop. Jeff then gets involved. He hits Poetry in Motion. We come back from break, and Jeff and Gallows are going at it in the corner. Jeff then hits Twist of Fate, reaches for the tag to Matt, but Carl tags in and attacks Jeff. Eventually, Matt gets the tag in after Carl racks himself into the post. Matt then hits a clothesline into a running bulldog for a 2 count. They then say that there's going to be a new Bring It to the Table on the network after tonight's Raw, which is odd because I thought all they did was cancel shows on the network, not create new ones, but okay. Anyways, Matt hits a side effect onto Carl, goes for a Twist of Fate, but Anderson stops it. Gallows then gets a cheap shot onto Matt from behind. They set up for Magic Killer, but Jeff breaks it up. Gallows then hits a couple of boots to Jeff and Matt. Then Matt recovers, finally hits a Twist of Fate onto Gallows. Jeff tags in, heads to the top rope, hits the Swanton Bomb. 1, 2, 3, Hardys win. At the end, the Hardys stare down Dash and Dawson on commentary. Then they have this huge beatdown on top of the ramp. However, there was one little thing that I noted here, and it may lend some evidence to the fact that Gallows and Anderson may still be a babyface team, or that may be in their future, and it was that Gallows and Anderson actually attacked Dash and Dawson first before going after the Hardys. So maybe that was another hint at their babyface turn. Not really sure, but if it was, that was the only thing that we got that made it seem like they were babyfaces in this segment. And the segment ends with Jeff hitting Poetry in Motion off of the stage onto Dash and Dawson. So my thoughts, not really much of a match here. Honestly, guys, this was pretty much boring nonsense. It was basically just a match that would lead us to a beatdown at the end with all three teams. I do find it interesting, though, that Luke and Carl keep getting involved in this Hardys Revival feud. So what I'm thinking is that we're probably headed for a triple threat match at SummerSlam for the number one contendership for the tag team titles. Either way, though, I think this was disappointing if you were looking for a Carl-Luke full face turn here. Otherwise, this was just a jam. It was just a match. It was a jam. Anyways, we go on, and Dean Ambrose gets interviewed by Renee. Renee's now pulling double duty now that Talking Smack is canceled. She now works for both Raw and SmackDown Live now, so we will be seeing more of her on both brands. She goes on to ask Dean what happened last week. She kicks it to the footage showing Seth and Dean working together to defeat The Miz, then showing Dean denying the Shield fist bump at the end. Renee then goes on to ask if he and Seth are getting back together. Dean says that they were a machine out there on Monday, but regarding that question, and before he can answer, Seth Rollins enters. Seth says that last week was special, yada yada, basically trying to get Dean on his side. Dean then just goes on to say that the WWE Universe might want to get them back together. Hell, even part of himself wants them to get back together, but he was burned by Seth once before, and it will not happen again. So, obviously, they are teasing the Seth-Dean tag team again, or possibly teasing a Seth-Dean match. Whichever one comes first is probably anyone's guess at this point, but based on this episode and where it goes, and last week where they showed Cesaro and Sheamus watching Seth and Dean's match last week, I'd have to say this probably leads to them teaming up and going for the tag team titles at SummerSlam. And obviously where the rest of this episode goes, that is where we are headed, I think. There is no official match announced yet, but it does look like that is where we are going. So, speaking of Cesaro and Sheamus, the very next scene, once we come back from break, is Seth Rollins running into Cesaro and Sheamus backstage. Cesaro goes on to say that he wishes he could relate to him and Dean, but he can't. They had the exact opposite experience, talking about him and Sheamus becoming tag teams. They say that they're the most dominant tag team in WWE because they trust each other. Cesaro then says Dean will never trust him or anyone else ever again. Sheamus then goes on to say that Dean was his last chance at success, citing that Seth is now all alone, saying he could be on Ride Along, and they say that they'll change the name of Ride Along to Ride Alone. Seth then gets tired of getting picked on. He then challenges one of them to a match. Sheamus immediately steps up to the challenge, saying Seth is in a hole and he should stop digging. My thoughts here immediately were that, Dean is obviously getting involved in this match. I'm guessing that Cesaro will get involved. He'll probably beat down Seth in a 2v1 situation, and Dean will enter to save him. And this will set up the match that I just predicted in that last segment, which was Dean and Seth versus Cesaro and Sheamus for the tag team titles at SummerSlam, because that is the only thing that makes sense at this point. And to be honest with you, I think that would be something that would be welcome. This tag team division is pretty lackluster at this point, so throwing in a powerhouse of a team like Seth and Dean into the mix, that could really spice things up, man, and it could really make things interesting. Now, if they do go for the titles at SummerSlam, I do think that Seth and Dean will win those tag team titles. Honestly, Cesaro and Sheamus have done absolutely nothing with them since they got them back, so Seth and Dean getting them at this point wouldn't even be a big deal. It's not like they're ripping the titles from this godly team of Cesaro and Sheamus who barely are on TV anymore in the first place. So I think that might reinvigorate this tag team division. And who knows, man, it might make us actually interested in watching these teams go at it. So we will see. But I do think this, though. I don't think Seth and Dean are going to be a tag team for very long. I could see Dean finally making that wanted heel turn very soon if these guys do in fact win the tag team titles. Next up, we have a Cruiserweight 3v3 tag team match next. This, I'm not going to go in depth into this. This is a waste of time. Tozawa wins with a senton onto TJ Perkins. This is just completely garbage. Get this shit off of my television. Anyway, we go on to Miz TV. Jason Jordan is his guest, like I said earlier. And after that mixed response at the mere mention of Jason Jordan in the opener from the hometown boy, Kurt Angle, I honestly fear for this segment right off the bat. I'm thinking Jason Jordan will get booed to shit. However, Miz will do his best to get this guy over, but then again, people do love the Miz, so they could easily side with him in this segment and completely boo Jason Jordan. But Miz kicks off the segment by saying, "I can't tell you how much I hate this city." So right off the bat, he ensures that no one will boo Jason Jordan here, really getting the crowd on his opposite side. Miz then introduces Jason Jordan, and Jason Jordan now gets his own music. I think this was the biggest part of this show for Jason Jordan, was that he's no longer using the American Alpha theme. He has his own music. It's a very generic song. I honestly couldn't tell if it was a remix of Kurt Angle's theme song. It did kind of sound like one, but it was hard to tell. But either way, very unremarkable theme for Jason Jordan. Miz then goes over the recent happenings, Jason finding out that Kurt is his dad, all that same shit. He then asks what it feels like to have the crowd boo him. So I thought that was interesting that Miz actually brought up the fact that this character isn't necessarily getting over as much as WWE probably wants him to. Jason then says the crowd will do whatever they want, and that's cool. But he says when it comes to boos, Miz is the expert on that. Here we go. It's that written comedy that they're feeding him. Here's this line. You need to deliver this line. It's going to be so hilarious. And it comes off very cringy. Anyway, Miz says Jason was impressive in his first match last week. People are now questioning how he is getting these matches, though. But Miz says he isn't one of those people. He then says that he has a proposition for Jason. He wants to guide his career, and he offers him an opportunity to join the Miztourage. Jason thanks him, but he says that he's good. He doesn't want to join. Despite Miz running down his accolades, Jason Jordan still denies the offer. He then says, "You're right. Why would you need help of the Miz when your dad is the GM and can get you any match that you want?" Miz then calls him naive, saying that the WWE will chew him up and spit him out, but Jason says he'd rather be chewed up and spit out rather than be associated with someone like the Miz. Miz eventually goes on this long tirade, just running down Jason Jordan and Kurt Angle, and eventually Jason says, "You can say what you want about me, but if you say another word about Kurt, I'm going to make you regret it." Miz then starts consulting with the Miztourage. They step in, they start bowing up to Jason Jordan, and then Miz just turns around, comes at Jason Jordan, but Jordan gives him a belly-to-belly suplex, throwing him into both Bo and Curtis as well. And that's pretty much how the segment ended. So, my thoughts here, this is actually a feud that I can get behind. Thank fucking God we aren't getting Miz versus Dean again, because this looks like we are getting Jason Jordan versus Miz for the IC title at SummerSlam. That looks like where we are headed right now. For one, that sounds like a much more fun match than the copy and paste job that we've been subjected to since December with Dean and Miz. I do not ever want to see those two again at it for years, because we have seen way too many of those matches at this point. Let it cool down for a bit before you ever put those two guys in the ring together again. Number two, Jason getting an IC title shot this early and this easily, I think that will help evolve that storyline that they are obviously pushing here with Jason Jordan getting that preferential treatment from his father. Now, as far as Jason's promo goes, I think he still has some work to do, man. He sounded a little too scripted tonight. His jokes that were supposed to come off as, being a hilarious badass just came off super cringy. You can totally tell this was something that was written for him, and he was told that he had to say this. I do like the whole idea of him protecting the legacy of Kurt Angle, anyone talking trash about his dad, Jason coming to just beat the shit out of them. I thought that was cool. And I also think that Miz versus Jason Jordan is a great first feud for Jason Jordan. I do think he still has a long way to go, but when you're put in the ring with a guy like The Miz, who can deliver one of the best promos in the company, that's just going to help elevate Jason Jordan that much more. I do hope that he can find his voice. I hope that Jason Jordan can rely less on a script, not fall into that Roman Reigns sort of trap where he's given these horrible jokes that, completely take you out of the mood. So I'm hoping that he doesn't go that direction and he can find his own voice and find his own character and really have a great match with The Miz. Anyway, we go to our next in-ring segment, and it's going to be Sheamus versus Seth. I feel like this segment probably would have worked more for me had they not shown their hand right away. I mean, we all know Dean is coming out here to help Seth. It's just too obvious. There is one thing I wanted to note here, though. They made a little adjustment to Seth Rollins' theme song. So during that first portion of it where there's that long pause before he comes out, some random screaming guy goes, "Burn it down," and then Seth comes out. I do like when they change up theme songs a bit. There was actually a lot of that on this show. There was 3 different theme songs now on this show. Jason Jordan, Seth Rollins, and Big Cass. But anyway, I do love when they change up theme songs from time to time to make them fresh, but this is a pretty unnecessary change, and overall it was just very off-putting. As soon as I heard it, I was like, what the fuck was that? But anyway, the match starts, And I went and actually did a little bit of research here because seeing Sheamus and Seth in the ring together felt very new and very fresh. I was thinking back, I was like, when was the last time we actually had seen these two guys in the ring together? The last time these two were in the ring together, not necessarily on a team, it was a lumberjack match on Raw nearly 2 years ago on October 12th, 2015. And the last time these two guys were in a one-on-one match together was September 8th, 2014 on an episode of Raw. So this has been a very long time since these two guys have gone head-to-head. Obviously not a whole lot of history between these guys, at least recent history. So Seth starts off, he has a nice flying kick off the ropes onto Sheamus, knocking him to the outside. He then goes for a suicide dive, but Cesaro distracts him and Sheamus gets in control. They're obviously teasing a Cesaro interference early in this match. We all know where this is headed. We come back from break. Both men are fighting on the top post. Sheamus then hits a rolling senton off of the apron for a near fall, which is a crazy move. Seth then comes off the top rope, but is caught by Sheamus for the Irish Curse backbreaker. Seth eventually throws Sheamus into the post, face first, getting back some momentum. Seth then hits an enziguri, sending Sheamus to the outside. He then goes for the suicide dive this time, and he actually hits it. He then hits a clothesline off the top rope into a sling blade. Seth then hits an elbow onto Cesaro, who was on the apron trying to get involved for another distraction. Seth then dodges a clothesline from Sheamus, rolls him up for a pin. 1, 2, 3, Seth wins. But as soon as Seth wins, Cesaro immediately runs into the ring and starts the beatdown. Sheamus and Cesaro are stomping out Seth, just completely mugging him at this point. The crowd is chanting for Dean. We actually get a "We Want Ambrose" chant, which is the first time I've heard that in fucking ages. Sheamus and Cesaro then just start leaving, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe WWE isn't as predictable as I thought. But, of course, Cesaro and Sheamus decide that they aren't done. They turn around, come back into the ring, they start beating down Seth some more, and then Dean finally comes out, which we all knew it was coming. He then takes it to them, but Cesaro and Sheamus actually beat the shit out of Dean here. Seth is obviously still out cold from the earlier attack, and he can't really help Dean at this point. They just beat the fuck out of Dean. They hit him with the neutralizer, then the brogue kick, and then the tag team champs they end up standing tall in the ring. So my thoughts here, completely predictable stuff, like I said at the top of this segment. I like that Dean got his ass beat, though, as soon as he came out, because obviously Seth could not help him because he was also out of it as well. So I thought that was a nice change of pace from the normal beatdown angles that they usually do. I do think that this helps build up their future match, even though this isn't officially announced at this point. I think having Dean come out and easily take them out probably would have been lame, and they do need to build up some heat between these two teams, so having Cesaro and Sheamus get the better of them in this little beatdown was probably the right call. I will say this, though. The crowd tonight in general was actually pretty cold. They were quiet. Pittsburgh was essentially dead all night, but I cannot blame them. But this crowd actually wasn't that hot for this. You know, I thought they would be a lot more hot for kind of a Shield reunion of sorts, but I think even the people in Pennsylvania knew exactly what was going to happen, so any surprise reaction pop was completely wasted when they basically told us right away that Dean was going to help Seth in this match. So I think the more interesting thing here, though, is that it looks to be our SummerSlam Tag Team title match. I think this is where we are headed, and I could totally see Seth and Dean winning this too, essentially creating a new tag team for a division that is desperate for new talent. So getting to see things like Dean and Seth versus the Revival or Dean and Seth versus the Hardys is something that absolutely excites me. Those are fresh feuds, and we all know how desperate we are for fresh feuds. So either way, I think this was a decent start to their build, and I do think this is where we are headed for SummerSlam. Next up, we have a Bray Wyatt segment. He comes out to call out Finn Balor. Bray goes on to say there is no escape, not for you, not for our children, and certainly not for Finn Balor. He says no mortal man can escape the darkness, saying we're all held down by humanity's shackles. He starts getting what chants immediately. I hate the what chants, but I gotta say this was deserved because I am just so sick of hearing the same fucking promo out of Bray Wyatt every single time. He goes on to say that he is Bray Wyatt and he is everywhere. Yeah, you're everywhere except the win column, Bray. He goes on to denounce the Balor Club, saying our blind illusions make us think that we can live vicariously through Balor. Halfway through this, I'm immediately starting to give up because I'm just simply tired of listening to the same old promos from Bray Wyatt. He's just a broken record at this point. He then goes on to ask the crowd how it felt when he took Balor and twisted his body last week. He then says there is no escape, drops the mic. Then Balor's demon music starts to hit. But when the lights come on, Balor is already in the ring. So he essentially pulled a Wyatt on Wyatt himself. As Bray approaches Balor, though, he hits a Pele kick, then drives Bray over the barricade with a drop kick. And that was pretty much it. So while I'm excited for this match, and I do want to see Balor versus Bray, mainly because we might get the Demon Balor from it, I think that might be a waste. There was a definite tease of the Demon tonight, though, because it was that long... It was the extended intro of Finn Balor. It had the red flashing lights happening, so that is an indication that they may be doing the Demon Balor for this match. So I don't know if that's necessarily a waste. I was kind of hoping that he would bust that out during a title match, not some meaningless feud with Bray Wyatt, but in the end, because of who Bray Wyatt is, being this whole mystical, dark character, I guess it kind of makes sense, but I do think it is sort of a waste. I am not excited to see these same old tired promos from Bray Wyatt, though. I can tell you that right now. He is so amazing on the mic, but the promos he cuts are the same exact thing every single time, and it's been that way since Bray Wyatt has come to the main roster. So it's just completely tired at this point. Look, when you have someone that talented, you can waste it by just throwing him out there to do a copy and paste promo each time he's in a feud. I'd much rather these guys do beatdown angles and stuff like that rather than cut, 10-minute long promos at one another. Either way, I think this was an okay build, but I could have done without the 10 minutes of Wyatt. I honestly wish Balor had something more meaningful to feud for at this point, but I think this is still a step up from Elias Sampson. So maybe eventually he can work his way back up to the main event picture, because I do think that is where Finn Balor belongs, but as of right now, he is still stuck in that mid-card purgatory. Next up, we get the actual main event for tonight. Now, it's not the final match that we get, but this is where the show basically ended for me, because everything after this goes fucking downhill fast. This is the triple threat match between Joe, Braun, and Roman. Immediately, I'm questioning why this is not the main event in the first place, but anyways... The match starts, Braun immediately takes it to Joe, then him and Roman go at it for a little bit. Braun hits a clothesline in the corner to both men. We head to commercial, we come back, and Joe and Roman are teaming up against Braun, tossing him to the outside. Joe and Roman go at it for a bit, and right here I noted, I'm really loving the history that these two guys are building up with each other in such a short amount of time. These are two future Hall of Famers, and it's absolutely incredible to watch their career-long feud build before our eyes. Joe and Roman, each time these two guys are in the ring together, my eyes are glued to that television. This is something that could be a WrestleMania main event. It can be a main event for multiple pay-per-views down the line, and it's simply just exciting to watch these two guys go at it. Anyway, Joe has a nice counter into an arm bar after Roman goes for a Superman punch. Braun eventually recovers and breaks up the hold. He drags Joe to the outside. Roman and Braun then start fighting in the crowd. This is obviously a no DQ match, so there's no countouts here. So a majority of this match did take place on the outside of the ring. Roman starts throwing Braun's face into the steel barricades. Braun then gets in control of Roman, throwing him into the barricade. Joe then runs in and grabs Braun in the coquina clutch, but Roman is able to break it up, and he and Joe go at it on the outside for a little bit. They eventually head back inside the ring. Joe goes for an Uranagi, but Roman is able to counter. Roman then hits a big boot, sets up for the Superman punch in the corner, but Joe rolls outside to avoid it. As Joe is on the outside, however, Roman comes off of the steel steps out of nowhere and hits Joe with the Superman punch after all. Braun is set up on the barricade. Roman starts hulking up. He goes for a spear, but Braun hits him with the boot, stopping the spear through the barricade. Strowman then starts throwing the steel steps into the ring. Joe then hits him with an enziguri into a senton. Then Joe runs into the ring and hits a senton onto Roman, goes for a pin. 1, 2, Roman kicks out. Joe then sets up the steel steps in the corner, tries to throw Roman in, but he stops him. Joe then locks in the Coquina clutch onto Roman, but then Strowman runs in and bulldozes them both. Braun then hits a running power slam onto Joe. 1, 2, Roman breaks it up. Really cool match so far, but I have to say, I can't help but feel like we're getting a little bit too much of what we're going to get at SummerSlam. This kind of felt like a spoiler almost. It was fun watching these 3 guys in the ring go at it and beat the hell out of each other, and this was a good match, but, this is the match that we are getting at SummerSlam, plus Brock Lesnar, so I'm really hoping that they aren't giving us too much too early, considering SummerSlam is only 3 weeks away. Anyway, the finish of this match, Braun starts teasing using the steel steps on Roman. The crowd starts doing yes chants as he revs up those steel steps, but Roman stops him and ends up using the steps on Braun himself. He then hits the spear onto Joe. 1, 2, 3. Roman wins and pins Joe clean for the first time in his career. My thoughts, this was a very long match, and I'm glad that it was because this is probably the best part of the show, to be quite honest with you. Lots of cool spots on the outside, and these guys went pretty hard tonight for it being just a random Raw, so props to them. I do think it's interesting that Roman won here, though, and he looks so strong in the process, because that makes me think that they will not be putting the title on him at SummerSlam. I also didn't feel like we needed to necessarily see this match tonight. Like I said, we're getting these guys plus Brock Lesnar in 3 weeks at SummerSlam, so I really didn't want to see a spoiler of the main event so early. But to be quite honest with you, how this show kind of panned out, how this episode of Raw panned out, this match was absolutely needed, or this could have ended up being one of the worst episodes of Raw in a very long time. So I don't think this was a match that needs much of a build, especially not in this way. Look, I'm not complaining about getting a good match on Raw. That's something that I always want. But it does feel a little spoilerish as we aren't really that far away from SummerSlam. So my other question, though, is why the fuck was this not the main event? What could they possibly have planned for the rest of this show that makes this a lesser main event than whatever they have planned? Very strange, but either way, it was a good match, fun to watch, and this show honestly needed it because so far it has been pretty boring, and like I said, man, everything from here on out goes downhill fucking fast. This third hour becomes the most insulting thing on television, and I honestly cannot believe that the main event that we got was the main event, and this was not. So, anyway, we have a Big Show Enzo segment backstage. Big Show is doing push-ups. Enzo then interrupts him and says he wants to apologize for getting him involved in this big cast stuff. He says that Big Show has his back and he appreciates it. Big Show then says that he likes that about Enzo. He always keeps it real. He says Big Cass is 7 feet tall, but he needs a lesson in respect, and Big Show says he can teach that. So immediately I'm thinking, oh wow, so this is our main event. Please. I guess Raw actually did end with that last match. So there's nothing else to see here, guys. We can end the review here because there is nothing left for us to watch. Anyway, though, Elias Sampson is in the ring. I honestly started to wonder who is actually going to be his next feud, considering Balor is officially done with him. Elias goes on to ask the crowd, who wants to walk with Elias? And this Pennsylvania crowd actually shows some signs of life and starts applauding this. Elias even shows some surprise on his face. However, this is his hometown, so it did kind of make sense. I'm guessing the crowd was smart enough to know that. But to be quite honest with you, man, Elias has been getting over himself. It doesn't really matter that he's in Pennsylvania, his hometown. He's not really getting over necessarily as a face like he was tonight, but as a character, he is definitely getting over, and that is what is so important. So props to him. He goes on to say that the people of Pittsburgh inspired him to write this song. However, although this is his hometown and his babyface pop, he sings a song that completely trashes Pittsburgh. Eventually, this crowd does turn on him, and then Kalisto's music hits. So we get Kalisto versus Elias. This is pre-show match city right here, guys. This is not going to make it onto the SummerSlam card. Hell, I don't even know if this will be on the pre-show. I don't know if this is just a quick feud for Elias so that he can beat the shit out of Kalisto and then move on to someone new. But I don't think we need to explain this match in super detail or anything. It's fucking Kalisto versus Elias in the third hour of a very long and boring Raw. Can you honestly blame me for not wanting to go into detail of this match? I don't think you can. Anyway, we started getting CM Punk chants during this match. Obviously, this crowd not feeling it. Elias eventually wins with this finisher, which Corey calls Drift Away. Elias definitely looked dominant, as he should. Like I said, I have no idea if this is a new feud or if this is just a match to help Elias look strong. Have no idea at this point, but it's obvious that the WWE is high on Elias Samson, so a feud with Kalisto where he just dominates the shit out of him might help elevate him a little bit, but as it stands right now, Kalisto really isn't that big of a deal, and him beating Kalisto honestly doesn't mean that much, so we will see what happens with Elias Samson in the future. Alexa then has an interview backstage, first appearance out of any women on this show tonight. She basically says that she's happy that she's facing Bayley because Bayley showed that she can't be extreme. And she says that she didn't want to face Sasha again anyway. Alexa says that she guesses that greatness took the night off when it came to Sasha versus Bayley last week. That was pretty much the promo, guys. I mean, she was just basically saying that she's happy about fighting Bayley and did not want to fight Sasha. So this promo basically tells me that Alexa and Sasha are not through quite yet. She's clearly teasing more interaction with Sasha, and like I said at the top of the show, I've been thinking that we might get a three-way at SummerSlam, and this promo might be the first indication of that. But other than that, this was just a typical Alexa promo. She goes on to tell us that Bayley is taking on Nia Jax next, and I honestly cannot believe that we're getting this match and another one before the end of this episode. This show is starting to completely drag at this point. Horrible third hour here from Raw. Next up, we have Dean and Seth backstage. They both awkwardly have their shirts off for some reason in the locker room. You'd rarely see Dean without a shirt on, and I think that's what also played into how awkward this felt. It was just an odd sight to see. Anyway, Dean says that he came out there to help Seth because he's Mr. Architect. He says that Seth put him in that position because if Dean didn't come out and save him, he would look like a jerk. So obviously they're still teasing dissension between these guys, but I think it's obvious where we're going for where they're going at this point. They're going to face Cesaro and Sheamus for the tag team titles at SummerSlam. The first hour of Raw pretty much laid that out as clear as day. I don't know how they can make it any more clear to us. So any more of this pretending that Dean hates him, all that bullshit is just tired at this point. We know where this is headed. Let's just get to it already. Anyway, we have that Nia versus Bayley match. This match starts off pretty typically. Eventually, Bayley gets a sleeper hold onto Nia until she shrugs Bayley off to the outside. We come back from break. Nia's in control. Bayley hits a series of knees in the corner, heads up to the top post, but is caught by Nia in a hold. Nia then lifts her up and drops Bayley face first into the mat. The crowd is completely dead during this match. Bayley starts acting legit hurt, as if this drop by Nia completely decimated her or something. She's selling her shoulder, just holding it the rest of the match. Meanwhile, Nia puts her hair in a side ponytail, just like Bayley's hair is, mocking her, essentially. I thought that was kind of a nice touch from Nia. The crowd, like I said, eerily dead at this point, just very awkwardly quiet, no one really reacting to any moves, and it just gave this kind of eerie feel to this match. Bayley eventually drop kicks Nia out to the apron. She then hits a running knee, all while still holding that shoulder that she has been selling. Eventually, Bayley does a crossbody from the apron onto Nia on the outside, but the crowd doesn't even react whatsoever. Then, all of a sudden, Alexa appears, comes out of nowhere, and starts attacking Bayley, which I'm immediately thinking, how is that not a DQ? What is going on here? The ref was sitting there watching the entire thing happen. Why was that not a DQ? Anyway, Nia runs at Bayley. She dodges, sends Nia into the steel steps. Bayley gets back into the ring. The ref is at a count of 9, 10, and Bayley wins by countout. Alexa at the end tries to chase down Bayley, but she can't catch her, and Bayley leaves the ring. My thoughts, really fucking bad match, like absolutely horrible stuff here. I'm honestly not sure if Bayley was actually hurt or what, but that was a really bad match, and it being this late into the show just makes me scrutinize it even more. Why are we still watching this show? This is the third hour. This is what they come up with. This has been utter fucking trash ever since that triple threat match. And now we top this. We basically top off this shit Sunday with a Cass versus Big Show as a main event match. So no, I'm sorry, Vince. The main event happened an hour ago. I don't know what the fuck. I don't know what the fuck the rest of the show has been. I have no idea. This has been completely awful for the final third hour. We finally get to the main event. Jesus Christ, I can't believe we made it. What the fuck has this last hour been? This was all a payoff to Cass versus Big Show. Give me a break. No one wants to see this. Why are we doing SummerSlam matches on Raw tonight? Not that this should be a SummerSlam match or anything. I don't think we should ever see these two guys in the ring again after the performance that they put on tonight on Raw. Maybe it won't, but it sure as hell seems like we're getting Big Show versus Big Cass at SummerSlam, and I'm almost pretty sure that they announced that tonight, even though anytime they mention these two guys, my mind just immediately goes blank because I just do not give a fuck. Anyway, Enzo comes out, he cuts a promo, says the same usual shit, no one cares. He eventually gets to the fucking point. He introduces Big Show to the ring. I think Big Cass actually has new music here. It's not the same song that he had before, I don't think. This is also a very generic theme song, so I'm not really sure why they decided to swap out one generic song for another generic song. And quite honestly, I think I like the old one better. So weird decisions as far as theme songs go all around the board tonight. The match starts. As soon as Cass gets in the ring, Big Show grabs Cass and starts the beatdown. The bell eventually rings. Big Show hits a chop to Cass. Cass tries to slingshot Big Show into the ropes, but Big Show stops him by holding the ropes, then throws Cass over onto the outside. Cass eventually goes for a big boot, but Big Show hits a shoulder tackle. Big Show hits a power slam into an elbow for a 2 count. Cass then hits a diving shoulder tackle into Big Show's knee. Cass then starts working over the leg of Big Show at this point. Enzo is desperately trying to get this crowd into the match from the sideline, but it just really isn't working. Pittsburgh is completely dead at this point. This match is fucking horrible. It feels like these two guys just don't mesh well together. You know, like I was saying about Shinsuke versus Baron Corbin at Battleground, how horrible that match was? That's what this felt like. It felt like two guys that just do not mesh well together. And it's basically just two big guys going at each other because they're both big guys. That's what this match essentially is. What the fuck is the fucking point of that? Anyway, Cass eventually hits a big boot to Big Show, sets up to finish it, but as soon as he does, Enzo jumps in the ring and jumps onto Cass's back, causing a DQ. So, I'm not sure why that didn't happen in the last match with Alexa, but okay, WWE, I guess I shouldn't worry about continuity. Don't worry about the rules. Anyway, Cass hits Enzo with a big boot, just killing the dude. Big Show eventually recovers and hits a knockout punch to Cass. All three men are sprawled out in the ring at this point. I'm not sure if we're supposed to be excited. I have no idea. The crowd is completely dead. Big Show is the first one to stand up, though, so they cue his music, and that's how we end this horrible third hour of Raw. So, my thoughts overall on the show, guys. The first 2 hours of this show, they weren't all that bad. It actually had stuff, that we were familiar with and we knew that they were building up for. That last hour, though, my God. This is the exact reason why Raw does not need to be 3 hours long. This 5-year experiment needs to end. When you cannot fill up 2 hours with decent enough stuff, then you just shove shit down our throat for the final hour. Why the fuck is this show 3 hours long? What the fuck is the fucking point of that final hour of Raw? A shitty-ass main event, a horrible women's match, needless interviews and backstage segments, zero entertainment for this final third hour. Cass and Big Show, this feud, it needs to die. I don't ever want to see these guys in the ring again. This was fucking horrible. They cannot put on a good show. Big Show's just out there calling shots in the ring. You can hear it the entire time. Everything they do in there looks half-assed and shitty. It's just not good wrestling. It's not good work. I honestly cannot get over how bad this final hour was. It was just completely despicable stuff. And, the WWE wonders why they're having to cancel all their shows on the network and save money and save face for investors. How about this? Here's a noble idea. Why don't you get rid of the third hour and put on 2 great wrestling shows back to back and get some momentum back in this company? Have 2 hours of Raw, that's a good show. Have 2 hours of SmackDown, which is a good show. And then you can actually start getting some good recognition for what you're doing. But no, instead, what do? They force a 3-hour show on us that is completely void of anything worth our time. No one wants to sit through that shit if you're going to give us garbage for a majority of the show. What the fuck was that last hour? Absolutely fucking horrible stuff. Anyway, the entire show wasn't horrible, just the final hour. I think the Seth and Dean stuff, while it's already starting to feel a little played out at this point, I do like it. I like where we might be headed with Seth and Dean tagging up, possibly winning the titles, and then maybe, just maybe, having Dean turn heel and turn on Seth in a complete role reversal. I think that would be an awesome new direction for his character, and something that, quite frankly, Dean Ambrose needs. He has been a pretty bland and pretty stale character as of late, so I think a heel turn for him would be super awesome. I think it would recharge him and bring out a side of Dean Ambrose that we have never seen. He could be a huge heel on this show, because as it stands right now, if he stays babyface in its current form, he's like maybe the 6th or 7th guy on this show as a babyface. As a heel, though, he can easily be number 1. Easily. So why not turn him heel? What is the big deal of not turning Dean Ambrose heel? So I really hope that is where they're headed with this. I think it makes the most sense, and taking the belts off of Cesaro and Sheamus honestly doesn't hurt anyone because, like I said, they are doing nothing with those belts. They're barely on TV anymore, so let's do something of worth with those titles for once. The Roman, Braun, Joe match, that was literally the only redeeming thing about this long-ass show, to be quite honest with you. It was honestly pretty fucking unbearable up to that point until we got to that match, so I'm guessing maybe that is why they put this match in the middle, because they knew no one was going to stay and watch this crap unless they gave us something ASAP. So that is probably why it was not the main event. They needed something to keep viewers from changing the channel. Anyways, I think it was a fun match. Those guys went out there and they beat the fuck out of each other, and they gave us a little taste of what to expect at SummerSlam, but I hope that they just didn't give us too much. Otherwise, we may have just been spoiled, and then there's no reason to watch SummerSlam. So either way, though, thank God they came out and gave us something entertaining, because otherwise I just wasted 3 hours of my life. The rest of the show, though, it was all hot garbage. There's nothing really left to go over. I will say this, though. I do like where they're headed with Jason Jordan. I do think that him versus Miz could be a fun match, and I think it helps build up Jason's story going forward. So very good pairing there. And I can totally see him winning the title from Miz. I think that would be a good way to get him some babyface heat ASAP. But overall, guys, I think this was a very bad episode of Raw. The final hour was just fucking disgusting. WWE should be ashamed of themselves. Just horrible. Honestly, they need to make Raw 2 hours, because 3 hours is too long, and there's not enough substantial things going on to warrant it being 3 hours. Absolutely insulting final hour of Raw tonight. What the fuck was that? Honestly, if you're going to make me sit through 3 hours of bullshit, at least make it pay off in the end. Big Cass and Big Show was fucking god awful. I don't ever want to see those two guys in the ring together again. They just don't mesh well, and they look like complete shit out there. So I'm hoping that WWE puts a stop to that immediately. Anyway, guys, that was our review of Raw. We will be back tomorrow for our review of SmackDown, which is a stacked fucking card. We got Cena versus Shinsuke and Kevin Owens versus AJ Styles for that rematch for the U.S. title. Are we actually going to see Cena versus Shinsuke, or will Baron Corbin come and interrupt all the fun? We will have to wait and see, but I am absolutely excited for that episode of SmackDown Live. This episode of Raw was absolutely bullshit, so I'm hoping that SmackDown Live can yet again come through for the week and save us all and end it in the week of wrestling, essentially, on a good note. So that has been our review, guys. I'm your host, Zach Stevens. Check us out on Twitter at Ramble_cast. Check us out on Podbean at royalrambleradio.podbean.com. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you're going to find the highest quality versions of our episodes. And yeah, guys, we will be back tomorrow for that review of SmackDown Live. I'm your host, Zach Stevens, peace out.